the Office of Planning here with two of my colleagues, Shepard Beeman and Matthew Jessic. We'll be going over a brief presentation on upcoming zoning text amendments in the RA-1 zone, as well as for alley lots in all zones or majority of zones. Um, just quick summary of where we are so far in the process. We're doing the second round of open houses just before these two cases are set to be heard in front of Zoning Commission in the coming weeks. Mainly just kind of want to do this presentation to highlight any of the changes since we last presented to you all, as well as give you guys a chance to give us some one-on-one feedback. But I'll turn it over to my colleague Shepard to start our RA1 presentation.
Yes, so good afternoon. Again, my name is Shepard Beeman. I'm with the Office of Planning, and I will kick us off with the RA-1 zoning text amendment. So just a little background about the RA-1 zone. So it is a residential apartment zone, and so there's a variety of uses that are allowed within this zone, ranging from low single-family detached housing all the way up to moderate density residential uses, including low-scale apartment housing. And currently, the RA-1 allows for one-family detached and semi-detached dwellings by right. Whereas new row houses, flats, and multifamily buildings require review by the BZA, as well as additions to existing multifamily buildings. And we'll see here mapped the areas within the district where there are RA-1 zones. So you'll see a larger concentration of that zone within wards 8, 7, 5, 4, and 3. So the goal of this text amendment is to do a review of the purpose and the intent of the RA-1 zone, to do an analysis of the comments and concerns brought up by ANCs and community members, a review of the development standards for the RA-1 zone, to look at the review criteria for BZA cases, to increase or to loosen the um, or to increase the flexibility of uses allowed in the RA-1 zone, um, and then to also allow some limited expansions of existing buildings in the RA-1 zone. And the one thing we want to emphasize is that this will not result in a rezoning of any, this will not result in any rezoning within the district from this text amendment. So looking at the development standards for the RA-1 zone, currently voluntary inclusionary zoning development requires special exception review. We are proposing to remove that requirement. And currently the development standards have fewer restrictions on lot sizes and dimensions. So we are proposing to include some development standards for lot sizes and for both standard lots as well as for inclusionary zoning. There are no other proposed changes to the height, rooftop structures, or rear yard requirements. And as for side yard, we are looking at proposing a few more requirements, as this tends to be the more sensitive area of discussion when it comes to new development in the RA-1 zone. In some cases, we've had situations where there is a proposal for apartment houses next to single family uses, and we want to be mindful about how we accommodate the more intense use in adjacency to the existing single family uses. So, and Michael will get to this a little bit later on in our presentation, but for now, we are looking at to allow 4 or less units by right. And for detached buildings, they'd be required to have 8 foot side yards, and for semi-detached, they'd be required to have one 8 foot side yard, and for row dwellings, there'd be no side yard required. And when it comes to buildings that are proposing to have 5 or more units, they'd be required to have 2 side yards regardless. And if the developer or whomever, architect, whatever, wants to come in and request relief for that, they would be allowed to request special exception relief from the side yard requirements through the BZA. And then for all development in the RA1 zone, if there's an existing building or dwelling with a non-conforming side yard, they would be allowed to add an addition or an expansion to the building, so long as there is no, as long as the 5 foot side yard is maintained. And then for the other RA1 zones, sorry, for the other RA zones 2 through 5, they would be required to have a 3 foot side yard minimum. And then looking at the remaining development standards for the RA1 zone, um, there are no proposed changes to lot occupancy, green area ratio, or minimum parking requirements. And with that, I'll pass the torch to Michael.
Thanks, Shepard. So, as Shepard alluded to, one of the biggest changes we are proposing in this text amendment is the changes to the by right developments. Just to reiterate that currently, the only by right developments for residential purposes that are allowed in the RA1 zone are detached and semi-detached, one or two family developments. Any new row building, or an expansion to or wholly new apartment house currently requires to go through the BZA's review for special exception for that use. Our proposed change is to allow all types of residential up to 4 units, so whether that's detached, semi-detached, or row dwellings, up to 4 units would be allowed by right, while anything greater than that would still need to go through the BZA special exception process for their review. Um, In addition to that, we're also proposing for by right um, a bit of room for renovations in that existing apartment houses in the zone will be allowed to be repaired and renovated, and they will be allowed to expand structurally as long as the structural expansions only um, increase the size of existing units, whether that be, take a single bedroom unit to a 2 bedroom unit or just add more space in the unit. Otherwise, we were also proposing that increases to apartment houses be so that they only convert spaces inside the building, or in some cases excavate out an existing cellar to add units in those sorts of spaces. So not changing the core footprint of the building. The last just to kind of go over very briefly. So the U420 special exception, that is essentially the apartment house special exception in the RA1. We are expanding on what is required by applicants in their filings. This is both to be a benefit of the applicant and the BZA so that everyone knows what's expected in order to pursue this relief. Additionally, the review requirement to submit existing and final grading will only be for projects of 20,000 square feet or greater, but they will be required to submit to the record a more extensive statement of of how the development works in the existing environment. So a little bit of the timeline process. I touched on this briefly. RA1 will be heard on November 6th. Um, During that meeting, OP will make a similarly more extensive presentation to the zoning commission in regards to this a text amendment. And then also always there'll be the opportunity for all of you as well as any other members of the public who would like to comment on the proposal. And then after that, the zoning commission may or may not take final action over the course of other meetings.
So I think that concludes our RA1 presentation. And I'm wondering, should we just hold off questions until the end and move on to alley lots, or do you want to take questions now if there are any?
Um, I mean, if we have a few questions,
I
um,
don't,
I,
I don't see any in the chat.
I think Commissioner Gosselin's raised his hand.
Okay.
Um,
Can you hear me?
yeah.
Okay. Two questions. First of all, would you go back to the map at the very beginning of your presentation? Um, just to, and let me just expand that for myself. There are zones in RA and C that are R-1A. What we're talking about here, just to clarify, is something different than that. R-1A is a moderate density single family zone. This is something different. This is a residential apartment zone. Are there any in any, is there any RA1 zone in ANC 34G? It does not appear to be so on the map, but I'm not sure I'm reading it correctly.
You're correct. So the RA, sorry, the R1A, it's a little
Yeah, I
confusing
know,
there,
I know.
but yeah, the R1A is single family residential. The RA1 is residential apartment, and there is none in the 34G ANC.
Okay. And the other question is this. As it now exists, there can be by right detached and semi-detached uh, in an RA1 zone. Does semi-detached mean just two units with a shared wall? I mean, is that what is the change? Is the by right change basically saying you can do essentially a semi-detached four-unit structure up to a four-unit structure? Is that the big change?
So, yeah, that would be one of the either you could do up to 4 units, like a 4 unit flat, whether it be semi-detached, whether that's one
Yeah,
shared
okay,
party
okay,
wall
okay.
or two shared party walls, a row structure.
Yeah, okay. Those are my questions.
Michael and Shepard, there's a question in the chat.
I do not believe there's a zoning change, a zoning map amendment with the omnibus. I believe that is also just a zoning text amendment. Um, there's only zoning changes if it's a zoning map amendment. Um, but I can confirm that with Joel since he's managing that case.
You have a question from my colleague, Laura Finizzi.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah,
You're
Yes.
unmuted.
Sorry. Okay. I have a couple of questions. I'm sorry. So I'm a little confused on the row houses. I've seen row houses like, say, on Calvert Street near Wisconsin and Calvert and the Guy Mason Center. It looks like they won't have to have a side yard. So if you have a house, can row houses be built on the lot next to your house with no side yard?
So
yes.
by so by definition, yes. That's yeah, a row house has no side yard, correct?
So that could happen to a homeowner. They could have, like, if the lots say were a standard 50 feet, that could allow for a three pack of 16-foot wide row houses going all the way to the side yards, to the property line.
So uh, again, this is the residential apartment one zone.
Right.
Um,
But where there was or is a single family home, if the adjacent lot were built next to them, it could go right to the property line?
Yeah, in any of our zones that row buildings are permitted, like Shepard just mentioned, a row building is just a building built to the property line with no side yard. Um, if you have questions about like a specific area that's currently zoned RA1, we're happy to discuss that. But
No,
it's kind of tough to speak in broad terms.
no, I'm just trying to make sure I understand that. So, I would assume that there would be some impact on schools, and looking at the area in Ward 3, those are some of the most overcrowded schools. Certainly the middle schools way over capacity, the high schools are over capacity. Um, what have you projected as far as impact on schools and how to account for that increase in density?
I can do it. Actually, that's a great question. And as part of the review for new development in the RA1 zone, um, they are typically required to have some kind of review by the park system, DDOT, and schools. So in this scenario, as we mentioned, like if there's a proposal for 4 or less units, they typically do not trigger any kind of cause for concern in terms of schools. So whereas if we're looking at a development proposal of 5 or more, they would still be required to be reviewed by the Office of Planning, DDOT, parks, and schools to ensure that they would not create any other issues in terms of, like in your case, with schools, like overcapacity or overcrowding. But yes, that is a part of the review process for new development in the RA1 zone currently. And again, we're looking at more so those projects where it's more than 4 units. That would probably trigger more of a not cause for concern, but just to ensure that there wouldn't be any overcrowding of the adjacent schools.
Do you have any hard data on how many apartments typically produce school-age children?
I don't think we have that data specifically, but we
Okay.
do have
Oh,
data on the actual schools themselves. And we have the numbers in terms of how many students are in those schools. And again, if there were, if we are looking at schools where there are higher numbers and we're approaching like capacity, then that we probably would like have some kind of impact on our decision, but we haven't encountered that yet.
I see. Okay. Two more questions, I think. Actually, three. You for the parking, you said there would be one parking space required for every 3 spaces, I think, if it were under 4 units, if I caught that right. Um, are all those new residents eligible for residential parking permits?
Believe they would be, but that would be a better question for DDOT. Um,
Okay, so there's no restriction on RPP, so you could have many more people competing for the same street space. And then you also said you would allow them to increase the size of the units, like adding a second bedroom. Like, wouldn't that almost guarantee that those units would become more expensive if they were bigger? Wouldn't that be?
they may
I'm
become
just
more
what's the
expensive,
rationale
but
for that?
yeah, sure. The rationale for that is in a lot of these older apartment houses,
Mhm.
what we see a lot of times when developers look to refurbish them, they try to find, ways to cover those costs. But it's
Mhm.
also, you know, primarily to facilitate more family-sized units. It's something that's awfully lacking in certain areas. And we
Mhm.
think that the ability to allow an existing apartment house to make, an addition to it that's still within the development requirements because we're not proposing any changes to lot occupancy as well as floor area ratio. As long as they can fit within the current by right development envelope that's allowed to them, we think that it will help preserve, some existing housing, which is often the most naturally affordable housing that exists in the district, as well as giving, that avenue to take those maybe one or two bedroom units and, maybe make it like a three bedroom unit to get more family sized units in the
Mm.
in the ecosystem.
And then my last question is, and the kind of the requirements at the end. I really liked how you were looking at sun and shadow, but I was curious about your grading that only lots of 20,000 feet, which in my part of the world it would be a very, very big lot, but because most of ours are 5,000. But why was grading not required for smaller lots? I mean, couldn't there be potential for water damage or sun or light issues for smaller lots if especially if they're kind of coming up on somebody's property line?
So all of these, so let's say if text amendment moves forward and a developer, looks to build some of those 4 unit types
Mhm.
of structures, they're still going to be required to do the same level of stormwater management review that any development would do. This is for just specifically the special exception process. And we kept it at the 20,000 square foot or greater scale
Mhm.
because that tends to be where some of the big red flags will show up in like the larger developments. Since most of the time when these applications go to the BZA, they're not
Mhm.
finished with the full engineering, especially when it comes to stormwater management. So
Mhm.
it's really for us, it was a decision that was made to move that to the larger, only for the larger applications twofold because we are asking more of all applications and we wanted to try to keep that to where it was most relevant. But that's still something, that we're open to receiving feedback on,
Yeah,
as is
just
the
grading
entire
grading is
proposal.
so critical for stormwater and for light. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
I think Commissioner Grunwald, I think you.
Yes, hi. Yes, hi. This is Carol Grunwald. I'm a commissioner with ANC 34G, which was very popular on this phone call this evening. Thank you so much for this presentation. But I am trying to figure out what changes in the omnibus legislation that you proposed actually pertain to our ANC. And at the October 7 informational meeting that I attended, a couple of things stood out to me that would pertain to Chevy Chase, and one of them was front yard relief, and the other one was the sizes changes to the sizes of accessory dwelling units or accessory buildings. Are you going to be discussing those issues today uh, at your meeting, at this
So
meeting?
we're happy to take your questions. Um, we're still in the middle of our presentation, and we paused for questions specifically on the RA-1 proposal. And when we were done fielding those questions, Mr. Jessic was going to do his presentation on alley lots, and then proceed to get some questions on that. Um, we're happy to take your questions on the omnibus proposal, but we are not the case managers for that. So we might have to follow up with you on email on some of your questions, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to know if you would be discussing them this evening, but I will listen to the rest of your presentation with pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, we're not specifically talking about any of the other, whether it be omnibus or the pop back. This is purely going to be a discussion of the RA-1 proposal as well as the alley lot proposal. But like I
Thank you.
said, we're happy to take those questions towards the end and follow back up with you.
Thank you.
Um, all right, Commissioner Gwendolyn, you had a few questions in chat.
Yeah, I wrote them into the chat so you can just
Yeah.
say it out loud.
Okay, so part of the development, when does the projections like density impacts to school incur? Um, oh, I see what you're saying. So currently, right now, in the U421 approval process, that's for all new apartments in the RA1 zone. A referral to DC Public Schools is part of the process. Uh, they, to my knowledge, usually don't partake much in the special exception. What we at OP will do is go and look at the school enrollment data and just kind of see kind of a aerial view per se of what the student count might be at the nearest schools, and we include that in our reports. So it's not it's not a true density projection like what you're discussing. Um, but that's again, that's for the larger apartment. Anything that goes through that U421 process, so 5 or more units, is still expected to respond to that and to be able to acknowledge how their development might impact school enrollment.
So just to clarify, is there any projections as we look across? Because the omnibus proposes to change some low to medium density. And then this also has some changes as well, right? And then we've also got the proposed 10 to 16 feet. And I'm looking at this all in one package because it's all going to happen potentially at the same time. And are you saying there's been no projections about the impact across the board of these together or individually, and no one's looked at that? And, I'm looking at this, we're in ANC 2E and we don't have a metro. We have very narrow streets. We have a parking problem. I mean, again, just to make sure that things are functional, right?
Well, I can't speak for the omnibus or but for the RA1 proposal, as the vast majority of the RA1 zone is not in areas of the district where there's overcrowding of schools. When we see a lot of these applications, the school enrollment might be only like 50%, since just where this zone land is and just based on some of the reviews that I've been a case manager on that have gone to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. So we're not anticipating a large, you know, projected impact
So no
for the
one,
RA1, but I understand what you're saying, and there are metrics that can be used to guesstimate how many student population might be produced by different unit types. But
so just to clarify, and I fully appreciate, this is a big project in itself, and I understand everyone's got their role. But no one's looking at, you have these three proposals, kind of the overall impact. And it's definitely, for schools, but I'm also thinking other things. We have some other challenges.
And
I'm
just to
just
kind of
wondering
add,
if it's being
sorry.
thought about just again, and how do we make sure that that is being considered and thought about as to what needs to be added to the infrastructure. So that's on the table about related work that has to occur.
And just to add to that, so again, as Michael mentioned, we consult with schools, but there's also consultation with parks and transportation and um, so basically we do discuss this amongst all the district agencies to ensure that if there is this increase in number of units, that there wouldn't be a negative impact on the surrounding area from multiple areas. But in terms of the different text amendments that are ongoing right now, we obviously we work together. So if and that's why we are coming to the ANCs now to make sure that like if there's something that we haven't like addressed or identified, that that this is the time that we can take your comments and make sure that there isn't any conflict amongst the different ongoing projects. So what we can do is definitely like make sure that there isn't. I think that's a great point to bring up in terms of the different projects that are happening right now um, within our office. But
Yeah, and
thank you for that
I'm
comment.
I'm just speaking to I'm in a with a lot of smaller houses, and as people add on, they dig out cellars, which I think would be now by right, or they expand beyond the lot occupancy, or people are building decks that aren't reviewed because they're in the back, right? And there's been a lot of flooding, and as we add this on, that's been a kind of a common challenge for us, as well as some parking and transportation, and we've had a lot of bus cuts recently. So we're obviously interested in ensuring that those things are well accounted for across the three, because they all really are connected.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So, yeah, I think again, thank you for that, and we
So
can just take that. Sorry.
yeah, are you the person that would look at across, like who is doing that? Just so we're clear about when you say it is being done, who is responsible for that?
What? I'm sorry,
Across
specifically
the three and how they relate.
the different text amendments.
Yes.
It's a team effort, but we'll have to kind of discuss internally about that. Um, but we do have a person. If you want the name specifically.
Yeah, just so we can follow up
Okay.
as we're because again, we're trying to look at this as the three, not just the one individually, because they do all relate to each other.
Gotcha. Well, that would be our assistant manager, Joel Lawson. If you want to reach out to him specifically, or we can get you in touch with him if you want us to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I have his information. And
Okay.
so it sounds like there's some projections, but they're not necessarily visible to us. And then I had other, it looked like landscaping plans are no longer required for smaller lots, or am I reading that wrong?
You're correct. And that is based off of most recent cases where it's sometimes requested, but it's typically not necessary. Um, and it's because honestly, in most cases, there is no landscaping. Um, However, if there are like, for example, like significant trees or heritage trees, they are reviewed, and to just to make sure that they're not the applicant is not proposing to remove any special or heritage trees on the property.
How does that work? If the plans aren't reviewed, how would you even know to?
The-
I
the-
hear
the-
I hear what
they're
you're saying,
reviewed.
but if
No,
it's by
So
right that you don't have to review it, how would I would read it if I could do it, and I know a lot of people would be happy about this. That you could submit a plan, and if it doesn't need to be reviewed, then you could take down the trees you need to want to take down.
so if you're referring to when heritage trees and uh, I'm blanking on the term for
special,
the other protected tree,
special.
special. All of that's reviewed at permitting. The special exception happens. It can happen at the same time as permitting, but the permit would be on pause if there was a special exception that was referred from the zoning administrator herself. Um, Often for this type of case, though, what we see is applicants go to the board with their request far before they start the permitting process. And the reason, more specifically why we moved the landscaping plan to those larger projects is we at OP still have to base our recommendations should we, recommend conditions for the board that still needs to be based on the impacts of the development. And for a lot of the smaller applications that we might see, which it typically takes like anywhere from a 2 to 4 unit structure and just excavates out the cellar and adds a few units. Um, w- we often don't have that same level of review to do when it comes to landscaping. We still ask for it, and the applications will still be required to submit streetscape and renderings of what they propose the development to be. They just won't be required to submit very specific like planting plans, like X species of bushes will be here, X species of trees will be here. Those will only be for the larger projects, which, because of the nature of the project, we'll have to do some of the baseline engineering work before they go to the BZA. Whereas the smaller projects, that typically doesn't happen at that time.
I'm just speaking from, my ANC area and based upon, what I hear sometimes from other ANCs. I think it would be a challenge to have someone spend their money to develop a by right plan, and including, I think you have a 200 square foot deck that is in the omnibus rule, for instance, that's by right, and some other by rights, and then no landscaping plan. And then you go through this process, and then all of a sudden at the end, they're told they can't take down the trees. It just feels like it's a little bit after the fact.
So
And that's my maybe, and again, maybe you're viewing this differently, but and we've put a lot of effort over in ANC2E about tree maintenance because of the benefits to the air quality and a number of other things.
yeah, and they're not here with us today because, again, this is our text amendment, but we work a lot with DDOT through the Board of Zoning Adjustments special exception process. And Shepard and Matt, you guys can chime in. We get, heads up all the time from DDOT when it comes to, hey, this application, because so I should probably preface. So the division that monitors and manages approvals or denials to remove those levels of trees actually lives within DDOT. And DDOT is referred any special exception.
Yeah, no, and
So
I'm very familiar with the process. What I'm
yeah,
trying to, Michael, I think maybe I'm not making myself clear. What's proposed here, and also in the omnibus, is by right. So someone develops a plan, and you can let me finish, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong. They develop the plan, and it's by right. So they don't, and they also don't, for the smaller lots, necessarily have to have landscaping. So at what point, and they have the 200-foot deck as well as some of the 16 feet right by right, at what point would they report that there's a tree? Why would you find out? Again, help me out to figure out what step that would happen in if it's all by right.
Can I
so
take a
Yeah.
stab at
yeah,
answering that? Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Jessic, work alongside Shepard and Michael.
Yeah, thank you.
Any tree removal requires a tree removal permit if the tree is over a certain size. So, and DDOT reviews those. So regardless of whether someone's doing an addition to their house or not, if they want to remove a special tree or a heritage tree, they need to get that approval from DDOT. And that's a separate process from what Michael and Shepard are talking about, which is, a BZA review of the use and the building itself.
So,
So
and
go ahead.
I get that. But I guess I'm saying, based upon what we see very much, is that people put a lot of money into plans, right? You're going to have these things roll out, and kind of finding out after the fact if it's not actually in this requirement. When you see by right, you think potentially those requirements no longer exist with urban forestry. And I'm very familiar with the process and DDOT, and I think they run a tight ship and they do a fantastic job. And we are in constant contact with them for a number of things. So just again, one could read this as that it doesn't, that requirement no longer exists, and
No,
it could confuse people, but maybe
Yeah.
I'm wrong.
no, it's a totally
Yeah.
separate set of regulations. The zoning regulations are totally separate from the urban forestry regulations. So, an architect will know that or should know that just because they're designing a house, or an addition, they don't get to, be, you know,
Exempt.
removed from the urban forestry regulations. Um, they should know that there are these other requirements, just as they would know building code, which is also separate from zoning. There's a whole host of regulations that they should know before they start into any development project, and they should make their clients aware of that, of course.
So yeah, this is not by any means like a way to bypass other regulations. And and I appreciate all these questions, but I think for the sake of time, I think we should move, unless we have any other pressing questions or concerns or comments. I think we should move on to the other half of our presentation. So I will.
Well, I see.
I do have a
Yeah,
Oh,
question.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. I'm just confused about the lack of clarity for the review process when you mention things with schools and so forth, because in the last comprehensive plan, the Rock Creek West section that my ANC belongs to and other parts of Rock Creek West, the city used to have specific language in there discussing like community planning and infrastructure and protection of public school spaces. And the city struck that out of the comprehensive plan as if basically saying that it was no longer required to be reviewed. So you're saying that now there is some review, but where is it and who does it?
Well, there's always
Because
been
it's
a
in the
review.
plan.
There's always been a review. Again, as I mentioned before, it's actually currently the regulations are more restrictive. So a lot of like even like if we're speaking like in small scale, if a building wants to add a second unit, they still have to go through this entire review process of the BZA that includes again review by DDOT, urban design, um, urban forestry, and schools too. So just again, we look at um, those numbers for each of the schools. So if we look at both elementary, middle, and high school to ensure that whatever is being proposed would not exceed the capacity of the schools within that area.
Well,
But that's
DCPS just said that our school, which was overcrowded at 817 and had 3 classrooms, which took it up to 871, now has capacity for 100 more students at 976. So how do we even know that the DCPS statistics are accurate? How do they shove in 100 more kids with no addition to the floor space?
I
I'm
don't
just
think that's the
saying.
question. We can't answer that question. But
But that's what I'm saying. Like,
but we
who's
do have
gonna?
those numbers provided to us.
Can
Mhm.
I,
So
Okay.
however they can accommodate that, that's through
Yeah,
DCPS.
they're
But
putting them in the basement in windowless rooms is what they're doing in my ANC right now.
right.
Yeah.
So for this specifically, we're looking at just the RA-1 zone. And again, we do have
Mm.
that review. And if there was a concern, um, again, that would be the time for the school system to provide us with some feedback if there was a concern, which we never have actually received any negative feedback. So, um,
Mm.
yeah, that's yep.
Interesting.
well, but could I just add, I do think the issue of how DCPS changes its numbers is not an issue for OP. But the point that you made before, Laura, that they did, in fact, strike these issues from the comprehensive plan as being considerations when we were making decisions about development. And so it is curious, Michael, and that we're hearing that there is, in fact, still a review process. We thought when you amended the comprehensive plan, I didn't agree with this, but I mean, I think it was struck out. So how come there's a review process if you're not required to have one?
This is,
So
so I think,
I
well,
can I can I can
okay, all
get
right,
this question
go for
sure.
it.
So that so the current RA-1 used to be called R5B. Maybe Matt remembers the he's been here longer.
R5A.
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 So the U420 review process for new residential developments in what we now call the RA-1 actually came to fruition in the 70s in response to some zoning actions that happened at that time that ended up leading to uh, development that wasn't being managed very well. And in response to that, this special exception came to be, and which includes that relevant agencies comment specifically on existing planned area schools to accommodate the number of students that could be expected to reside at the project. And this is unique to RA-1, and this is, to my understanding, the first time OP has cracked open, per se, the RA-1 regs, and we couldn't justify taking out what typically amounts to just checking what the local school enrollment is. And like I said, based on where the zone is and the type of projects we see, they're usually not in the areas of the district that have that over enrollment problem. Um, but that we just couldn't justify taking it out of the review, so that's why it still remains here, and why there might be some confusion with how that relates to maybe that item from the comprehensive plan that got taken out. Um, Um, I think so. We're happy to answer any more questions about RA-1 after Matt has done his presentation on alley lots, but I do think for the sake of time, at the bare minimum, allow him a chance to get through his presentation.
Thanks for being patient, Matt.
No. Thank you. Great presentation, guys. Again, my name is Matt Chesick, Development Review Specialist with the Office of Planning, and I've been managing the alley lot text amendment process. Thank you for joining us this evening. For those who were with us at the spring ANC meetings, this may be somewhat repetitive, but I felt it was important to kind of cover all the bases again for those who might be new to alley lots. But as I go through, I'll try and point out some areas that we've updated since the April-May timeframe. Sorry, let me go back one slide. Sorry, Shepard. I'll take control.
Okay.
So I know there was a question actually last time about, kind of what are the purposes of the alley lot text amendment. And if any of you have reviewed our written report to the Zoning Commission from May, we went into it in detail there. But I can just kind of sum up for this evening. One, we always look to the comprehensive plan first, and we want to try and fulfill some of the policies of the comprehensive plan, such as um, uh, you know, uh, allowing for more infill development and efficient land utilization, and especially finding some innovative approaches to housing development in neighborhoods. Um, but at the same time, the comprehensive plan does talk about matching the character when you do have infill development, matching the character of the existing neighborhood. So that's another purpose of our text amendment. Another goal is to facilitate these hard to develop vacant lots that are sometimes eyesores or nuisances to surrounding properties. And that we've heard from these property owners over many years that their various problems with them are preventing them from being used or developed. And then finally, we want to clarify some of the regulations to make them easier to use for the public, ANCs, certainly the Board of Zoning Adjustment and Zoning Commission, as well as staff. Shepard or Michael, I'm having a hard time getting control. I don't know if you guys need to grant me permission.
Should have control now.
Okay. Great, thank you. So what are we actually proposing to change? The proposed amendments fall into three major buckets. One, the subdivision rules, two, the use regulations, and then also development standards, things like lot occupancy and yards. And I'll go through these in more detail in a moment. We feel that these regulation changes are pretty focused, pretty specific, but we do hope that they will be helpful both to the alley lot owners and to neighbors. So the Zoning Commission really gave us our marching orders here. They considered a previous zoning text amendment, Zoning Commission case 1913. And during the hearing for that case, which was mostly just sort of a wording cleanup text amendment, they heard from property owners that we needed to go further to make their lots usable. And I think the Zoning Commission was very sympathetic to that viewpoint or testimony. So they asked us to go back and study alley lots again. Over the years, we've also heard from the BZA that this needs to be looked at. Property owners have been in regular contact with us looking for updates. And then even some other city agencies have provided us with some guidance. And like I mentioned a moment ago, we always looked at the comp plan to form and shape our text amendments. So that was no different here in this case. So I think as ANC commissioners, you're probably all familiar with alley lots, but if not, just as a refresher, an alley lot is simply a lot that does not have any street frontage. It only fronts on an alley. And traditionally, they've been more restrictive in terms of the uses, as well as the size of buildings that can go on alley lots, certainly more restrictive than the street-facing lots around them. And the image on your screen is just sort of one prototypical example. Alley lots can come in many shapes and sizes and many different relationships to their neighboring street-facing lots. So this is just one example, but there are a number of different types throughout the city. So just a little bit of data on where alley lots are. We estimate there are about 1,900 total. Most of them, well, the largest concentrations, I should say, are in the older parts of the city. Georgetown, Capitol Hill, some areas north of downtown have a little concentration. As you get out towards the edges of the city, those numbers drop off quite a bit. And some ANCs have almost none. Now, just starting to look at the specific changes. First, the subdivision rules. Today, there is a alley width requirement if you want to create a new alley lot of 24 feet. And we propose to reduce that to 15 feet. The other requirements would stay the same. There would be no change to the lot area minimums or the alley frontage minimums. The way you can combine existing record lots or existing tax lots into new record lots. That would not change. But we do propose a special exception process to allow the BZA to review requests to deviate from the matter of right standards. Moving on to use permissions, the biggest change here is in the R1 and R2 zones, where presently for alley lots, no residential use is permitted. You can do all the other uses, just not residential. We propose to allow residential and to bring that in line with street-facing lots. So you would have one principal unit on your lot, and you could have an accessory unit if you chose. And that accessory unit would either be matter of right or special exception, depending on the lot size. And that's the R1, R2, and R3 zones. In the RF zones, our row house zones, we again propose to bring that into alignment with street-facing lots to allow 2 units. And that would be matter of right under 1,800 square or over 1,800 square feet, and a special exception if it's under 1,800 square feet. And then for alley lots in the RA zones, the apartment zones, we propose 2 units per lot. Now, we do have an alley width requirement for residential uses. And similarly, as we saw in the subdivision regulations, it's 24 feet, or today it could also be 15, depending on your location. We propose making that 15 feet across the board. Today, there is a special exception process if you're below 15 feet. That would remain the same. Now, one change that we made since I think we met with the ANCs the first time, just talking with some alley lot owners, we are proposing to add home occupations as a permitted use. And this is a defined term in the zoning regulations, and it has its own set of rules for small home-based businesses. So we would propose that that be allowed on alley lots as well. Moving to commercial zones, these are the MU zones. Today, you can do whatever you can do on a street-facing lot. You can also do that on an alley lot, and that would not change. So no changes to the use permissions for MU zones. Moving on to development standards. Here, we're adding in the residential use in the R1 and R2 zones, but we're also cognizant of the prevalent character in those zones. So whereas today you could have a very high lot occupancy, what we're proposing is to have a more strict lot occupancy. So for the smallest lots, a maximum of 80% lot occupancy, whereas today for the smallest lots, it could theoretically go up to 100%. But then we would step down from 80 to 60 to 40% lot occupancy for the largest lots, and then that's in line with the street-facing lots. So again, that's to try and match the character of those zones, R1 and R2, where it's anticipated that there would be a little more open space. Regarding yard requirements, this is a change we made based on feedback from our first round of ANC meetings. The requirement today is 5 feet for your yard from when you're adjacent to a non-alley lot. In the R1 and R2 zones, we're proposing that there be a yard requirement from all lot lines, 8 feet in the R1 and 5 feet in R2. And then a further requirement where your alley lot, if it butts up against a street-facing lot's rear yard, you would also have a 25-foot yard requirement on that side, and 20 feet in the R2 zone. So again, we think this would help match the character of those neighborhoods a little more closely. Now at the bottom, regarding height, you'll see in all of these zones, we're making a slight change to the height maximum, going from 20 feet to 22 feet. And that is to match the existing permission for accessory buildings. Moving on to RF zones, no substantive changes here. We are clarifying some of the language in the yard standards, but the requirement for 5 feet would stay the same. Moving on to RA zones. Today in the RA zones, there is no standard for lot occupancy, so we propose to add that. And we're copying that standard from the RF zones. Now in your ANCs, you're probably familiar with the section known as 5201 in the zoning regulations. This is a catch-all special exception for when a property owner wants to build an addition to their homes, or in some cases, build a new home from scratch. They can use this section to request relief from the Board of Zoning Adjustment. And part of that section does deal with alley lots, but the alley lot section today does not include lot occupancy, whereas it is included in the other parts of that section. So we propose to add in lot occupancy for alley lots. And finally, development standards for MU zones, no significant changes. We are tweaking the height for some of the MU zones, but that's the only change to the development standards. So in terms of the actual changes, we feel they're pretty targeted, but again, we hope to, we hope they're useful for owners and for neighbors. We do plan on reaching out to owners again before the public hearing with the Zoning Commission. We're continuing to make final edits to the draft zoning text. Then we'll prepare a new report to the Zoning Commission. Our existing report is on our website, which you can check out. This will be a similar but updated report. And then the hearing is on November 13th. I probably don't need to tell you that the Zoning Commission really loves hearing from ANCs, loves hearing from constituents. There are a number of written comments already in the record for alley lots, so we appreciate everyone lending their voice to that. Folks can also, of course, come to the hearing and testify, on that night. So that's always welcome. We anticipate after the hearing there would be refinements requested by the commission. So we will do that. But in terms of the overall process, it's the same that you've probably seen before for zoning commission projects, whether it's a map amendment or text amendment or planned unit development. They had the set down in the spring, public hearing in November. Then at some point there would probably be proposed action or the first vote, a comment period, followed by final action before any regulations take effect. So that's the process going forward. So, yeah, would love to get your thoughts. We appreciate you being here. Of course, we know that Office of Planning makes a lot of requests for ANCs to, join us in meetings, especially with the comp plan going on and other text and map amendments. So we really appreciate your time. We do have a website, as I think Michael and Shepard mentioned. There's one for alley lots, one for RA-1. We also have a dedicated email address. You can reach out with questions or comments, alleylots@dc.gov. So yeah, happy to take any questions. I think I saw some things going into the chat. I can review that. But if there are other questions about RA-1 as well, I think Michael and Shepard can also take those.
I did think there was one question about. Never mind. It's about
Okay.
the maps. Yeah, it's about the maps.
You did get a question, Matt, about short-term rentals.
Okay, let me see that. Short-term rental allowed if the goal is more housing. Why are you proposing these new units can be short-term rentals? That is an existing regulation. We're not proposing to change that. Those uses are already permitted today. So, again, we're not proposing any changes there.
So is that something that you maybe should be proposing? I'm just wondering, like, if the goal is housing, we personally have a lot of in ANC 2E people buying up housing and renting it, and it's not long term, and I don't think it speaks to the bigger goal here. So I hear what you're saying, but there's a number of things that you have changed. So why wouldn't you change this?
Really, when it comes to uses, we're not changing that much. We are proposing to allow residential, like I said, in R1 and R2, and then the home occupations. But really, all the other uses we would propose just to leave alone. If that's something, if that's a formal request, we can consider that. I think, just given the nature of this text amendment, I think we'd be reluctant to add that change of use in here because that was its own text amendment not that long ago that the zoning commission approved for short-term rentals. I forget when that was, 4 or 5 years ago.
It just doesn't jive with the bigger goal. That's my, read from it. So, and I see a lot of changes when you look across the 3 proposals, the 10 to 16 feet, the 24 amendments, and then this. And we have 180 lots in our ANC. And, having the concept of 180 new, potentially 1 or 2 units that just temporarily are going to be bought out and rented doesn't add to our housing stock.
No, certainly I understand the concern. I think in your particular ANC, a lot of those 180 are already developed. So I don't know if they'd all be, converted to short-term rentals for in that case.
But they could be, and I guess we don't have a map. All we have is a map of the lots. We don't have what's been developed and what's not. So it's very hard to project the impact of this onto our community. And as you know, like ANCs have, we have, next to no resources, and trying to project this to say, does it help with housing? Does it not? Knowing what's happening on the ground with so many people purchasing and then just making an investment. I really don't understand how that didn't get challenged. Given there's so many changes being proposed that we decided not to do that. That would be one thought. The other question I had, have you consulted HPRB or CFA on how the 3 related amendments kind of impact the work they do on the Ships Lucid and the Georgetown Act, and how do you see those interacting?
We have not consulted with HPRB. We did send a referral to DHCD, but have not heard back from them. But we can certainly check with the Historic Preservation Office to see if they have any concerns about one or more of these amendments or all the amendments together.
I think that would be very helpful. Just again, for the purpose of, I think some of this seems like streamlining and the earlier innovation and residential use, cost reduction, right? Just so there's clarification of how they interact.
Right. Thank you.
I've got a question. For some reason, I don't think you can see my hand raised, so it's been raised for a while. This is Carol Grunwald, Commissioner from ANC 34G again. I looked at the zoning maps for my area, Chevy Chase, and I could not find any alley lots in our area. But I see Commissioner Finizzi from my ANC says that our ANC has 27 alley lots. Can you please show us where they are? And how does an alley lot become an alley lot?
Well, most of these lots have existed for, since the neighborhood was built, especially in your neighborhood. Yeah, I think in 3 and 4G, you might be familiar with some of they tend to be triangles. There's a cluster of alley lots in your neighborhood that are triangular shaped in the middle of blocks that I think are often used for community gardens today. Um, so, I don't know what those owners' plans are for those lots, but that's maybe almost a unique characteristic of the alley lots in your neighborhood. And then I was looking at the map earlier for 3-4G. It looks like there are just a few other kind of random ones scattered here and there. We can certainly provide you with a map. That's
But yeah,
doable.
shouldn't they just appear on the zoning map that we can, the zoning map that we can all see? I mean, we shouldn't have to contact you guys to make sure we're seeing everything.
Yeah, no, it's not a layer of data that has typically been mapped. We needed to create it from scratch, which was not an easy process, and it's kind of way above my level. But luckily, we have some technical guys on staff that can help us with those things.
Okay. So are these lots designated? Do they have a special designation, or are they just considered R lots? Our residential lots or R1 lots, or I mean, how do you
Yeah,
differentiate them? Is there some kind of label that they bear on your zoning map?
there's no different label on the map if the neighborhood is zoned R1B, for example, which you have a lot of in your ANC.
Right.
It would still be R1B, but then within the text of the zoning regulations, there are additional restrictions on alley lots and how they can be used and the size of the buildings. And that's what we're looking to update here with this text amendment. So yeah, there's not a different designation on the map,
Right.
but
So
it's the same
right.
zoning.
So am I understanding correctly that in the R1 zones, R1 zone, you are now allowing housing to be built on these lots, on these alley lots for the first time? Am I understanding that correctly?
That's our proposal, yes. Today you can do any other use in the R1 on the alley lots, but not residential. So we're proposing that be allowed.
And residential includes, just to clarify, that it's actually short-term rentals. So hotels, or short-term, it's not residential, it's potential commercial use.
Well, it's not a hotel.
Well, short-term rental, depending on how you want to look at it, but it's not a resident. When we say residential, I think we just need to be clear that it's not all residential.
Yeah, the short-term rentals, I believe, are only accessory to a principal residential use. So there has to be another unit, a permanent unit on the site. Let me pull up the regulations, at least on my end, just to make sure I'm correct in that.
There's two. That's through licensure, and there's Matt's mentioning the one where there does have to be some owner occupation level, and then there's another where there doesn't, and there's different caps on the number of days that those can be rented.
But and just to be clear, for alley lots, the short-term rental has to be an accessory use to a principal residential use. That's a restriction in the zoning. And I can point you to that section if anyone wants to look up the zoning detail.
Mr. Jessic, would you kindly send a map showing all these lots that exist in Chevy Chase, please, and ANC 34G to all the ANC 34G commissioners, please?
Sure thing.
And I would just say that'd be very helpful immediately, because we're going to have a meeting where I think some of this may get discussed soon. So that would be, I'm also with 34G. Could
When
I
is your
ask a couple
meeting?
of questions? I'm sorry,
Um,
Carol, can I go?
Sorry, just when is your meeting?
Next
meeting-
Monday.
On the
Next
27th.
Monday. Okay, yeah, I can try and get that to you before then. I'll commit to do that. Just to go in order, I believe Commissioner Benizzi has your hand up first. Or Commissioner Grunwald, were you
Yeah.
complete?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm done. Thank you very much. I for some reason, I can't lower my hand. I don't know why it's not working properly.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Matt, you did
Yeah,
get a
I
quick
just
question
think-
about camping.
Okay,
Oh.
yeah, I just think that we need the map, and anything that's going to be voted on as a section, it needs to be a GIS layer so that people can search it publicly. That would be, I mean, that's just fair and courteous.
We might be able. I do not control the GIS system for the district, so I can't necessarily commit to that. But I can talk to our GIS folks to see how that would even be done. Commissioner Goslin, and then we'll go to the chat to see the question in the chat.
I still need some very basic explanation about what an alley lot is. So if I have if my, particularly given, Matthew, what you said about that it has to be attendant to for it to be short term, it has to be attendant to a principal residence. So if I have a lot, and the back of it, and my house is on that lot, and the back of it faces an alley. That is only an alley lot if it is a separate lot. If it is in the tax records, it's a separate lot, and it's not part of a lot that faces a street. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the example I have on the screen, the alley lots are kind of all on an island. But yes, you're right. There are several instances around the city, many instances around the city where an alley lot does butt right up against a street facing lot. But it's only an alley lot if it's actually a separate property. And you can't build on a tax lot. So just to be clear about that. So if that lot has an 800 number, that's a tax lot. You need to get a record lot if you want to build on it. That's what a lot of the existing regulations speak to. And then, if someone wants to do that, they can follow the new subdivision rules.
Well, then, following up on Gwendolyn's questions, if it's a separate lot, how is it ever attendant to a principal residence? I mean, I'm confused about how that works.
Well, the alley lot itself would theoretically have a principal residential use. And then if someone chose to, they could establish like an Airbnb within that same building or an accessory building on the alley lot.
Okay. Just a very simple question. Are there such things as 5,000 square foot alley lots? Are
Yeah.
There are a handful, yes. I think the largest one, and it's rare, but there is one in a different neighborhood, I think goes up to 17,000 square feet. But there are a handful that are over 5,000. In fact, in 34G, I don't know how long you folks have been on the ANC. There was a famous case almost 20 years ago now called Alley Cat Muse, which someone wanted to develop a 7,000 square foot alley lot. So they do exist. It's fairly rare.
Okay, I take my hand down.
Let me check the chat. Okay, ANC 4E would also like a map. I see that. And then Commissioner Finizzi, did that last discussion answer your question about the neighbor owning a house? Okay. And let's see. Commissioner Los, I see your question about access. And this was what we were saying in our email response to you. The alleys themselves are not being changed. The alleys would still provide access to the surrounding lots. I did put in a question to DPW to say if someone wanted to switch their trash collection to a different point, say moving it from the alley to the street, how is that accomplished? I have not heard back from DPW on that as of yet. But the alleys themselves, generally speaking, would still provide access to adjacent lots. The alleys are not being changed. We're only talking about private property here. And then regarding your question about short-term rentals and 15 feet wide, again, the width is the width of the alley. It's not necessarily the width of the property. So when we talk about 15 feet wide, that's a standard for the alley width. It's important to differentiate between the public property, the streets and the alleys, and then private property, which is your lot where you or an owner develops the property. People can feel free to speak up or unmute themselves and just shout out questions if you like.
Could you also send this presentation to the people you're sending the zoomable map, or if possible, zoomable map of the Chevy Chase alley lots?
Yeah, we can definitely send out the presentation to everyone on the call, and then it'll be posted on our websites, the RA-1 website and the alley lot website.
Okay, good.
I have a wiring easement question. We have some strange situations where we have and maybe it's not strange to you, but I think it's strange. We have poles in the alley, and the phone company may run from one single pole, runs wires to 7 houses on one side of the pole. And so, my neighbor has wires to 3 different homes going through his yard. I've got a wire for the person north of me just cutting through my backyard, 12 feet over my head. That, is very disruptive to my outdoor space, right? And to our trees. But what happens when you have these alley lots? Where do the wires go? Because cable companies are on the street. And so if the alley is an island, then do the cable companies run through other people's yards altogether to service these alley lots? Same for Pepco, right? They're on the street. So how do they get their power?
Yeah, the owners typically are responsible for bringing the infrastructure to their property. So, it sounds like in your case, maybe that's a situation that has existed for many, many years. I'm guessing. I'm hopeful that these days, people would not just randomly string electrical service across, my property. If they needed to, hopefully they would request an easement. Utilities typically are beyond what zoning looks at. But that is a concern that we've heard from owners, is that, one reason why we're doing this text amendment is the cost of bringing in utilities into their lots. So I think it's an issue that, has come up before, but I mean, crazy things happen, but I'm hopeful that these days the electrical company would not just be stringing power or other lines, across people's property.
But there's no prohibition on it. And the current easements that were written, back in the times of, Thomas Edison or whatever, not that long after, they don't really, they're not current with best practices, but they still exist. They haven't been changed.
Well, we don't have any control over old easements. We could, I don't know, we'd have to talk with our legal counsel about if there's a way zoning could even address utility easements. I've never seen that. Typically utilities go within the public right of way until they get to the property. So yeah, that would be the alley. I can look into that. I'm not promising any results there.
Okay. Thank you.
Is it appropriate for me to now ask questions about the omnibus bill? Excuse me.
You can ask questions. I think, like Michael was saying, we'll just have to take those down and.
Well, they're just, very quick. So I see that the alley lots amendments, the hearing for that is on November 13th, right? So I understand that there are two more hearings coming up quite soon. I understand that there's a hearing on October 27, and the omnibus hearing for all of 24 proposed amendments is upcoming on October 30. So what is the hearing for on October 27, please?
Your addition.
I'm sorry?
Correct. Yeah, there's another text amendment dealing with rear additions.
Oh, rear additions on the 27th. What zones do those apply to, please?
Well, Michael and Shepard, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that's only in the RF zones.
So only RF, okay.
Or it might also apply in R.
I think it's R as well. I don't know to what extent though.
I'm sorry, I missed that. R what? Does this apply to Chevy Chase at all? ANC 34G?
I believe it's only where there are attached dwellings or semi-detached.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it does apply to, yes, it can have an application there.
Yeah, so wherever in your ANC, wherever there would be any semi-detached units, I believe you have a couple real tiny pockets of RF zoning. So there might be row houses there where it would apply.
I see. Okay. So the October 20, just to make sure I have this right, the October 27 hearing is for rear additions in the RF semi-detached zone. And the October 30 hearing is for the omnibus changes, the 24 changes.
Right.
Thank you.
Slight correction. So the like we said, the pop back is for both R and RF zones.
Oh,
except for it only applies in the R zones in those shared wall scenarios. So it is to both R and RF on the 27th.
Thank you.
I think there was one question about camping, and Matt, I don't think we've changed that use explanation. And we just as a general, if there's no formal definition of something in our code, the zoning administrator defaults to Merriam-Webster. So
Oh, yes. Thank you, Michael, for pointing that out. Yeah, Andrew Gerst from the Office of ANC passed along your question to me, Commissioner Los, and I did send him an email about that. There is no definition within zoning defining camping. But the use permission itself provides a little bit of guidance. So if he hasn't passed that along to you yet, I'm happy to do that.
And I have a
Yes.
question. Yeah. Um, like when these zoning amendments came out, I don't know, they were looking like in June, and there was kind of this 4-month period. I know there was some things that we could do in July, but some of us were perhaps away or tied up on other things. And then we have this, and there's another meeting in another week, and another meeting in another week, and then we have hearings, and it seems like it's very tight for us. Like we won't have time to talk and meet and get, we have to present ANC agendas a week before the deadline and notify our constituents. And, that it's so backloaded. It wasn't spread out over the last 4 months. And so we're not going to be able to discuss this with our constituents publicly before the hearings. And I think that's done us a real disservice.
Well, I apologize about that kind of confluence of hearings. We recognize that it's a burden on the ANCs. We appreciate you volunteering for your ANC work. We did not intentionally cluster them. It's certainly more work for OP that way. I would say the zoning commission would love to hear that concern. I think we do not have full control over the hearing dates, but the zoning commission, if ANCs need more time, the zoning commission is very receptive to giving ANCs more time. So I would bring that up in a testimony or a letter to the zoning commission.
Yeah, well, I think you're going to hear a request from at least our ANC, but perhaps others for more time on the omnibus for sure, and on the rear yard ones. Yeah, the rear addition one.
Any other questions?
Again, we do have the websites too, so you can always post additional comments to the website or send us emails to either RA-1 or Alley Lots.
And you are going to get ANC 34G a map with its alley lots.
Yes, I
Okay.
will do that this week. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, really appreciate everyone being here. We got some really great feedback, and we will get back to you with these questions.
I hate to, I appreciate all your time. Can you just answer the question on the camping? I just want to understand that.
Oh, sorry. So your question, are we saying alley lots can have camping? Yes, that is a permitted use today. So that
so an ongoing, you haven't changed any of the uses. So we have just to make sure we understand. So we've rolled out this proposed alley lot proposal. I sought the map back a bit ago and have it. I don't know which ones are built on, which ones are not. And we have 180, and it's primarily for housing and residential, but we haven't changed any. So we've made a bunch of changes that smaller units can be created, and lot occupancy can change, and more units can be built depending on what RF. but that none of the uses have changed.
That's correct. We're not proposing to change any of the existing uses other than, like I said, in R1 and R2, allowing residential in those zones, and then allowing home occupations in all zones.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so hip camping, Airbnb, it could be, glamping or whatever. And I'm still not totally clear on, the visual here. I know there's a lot of ways alley lots can be structured. And I know we had this conversation a bit before, but so this is one way they can be structured. If they were structured like this and a new unit was built or a new building was built, and you're saying for the Airbnb, there'd need to be a primary residence built, and then it would have to be the majority of the lot, and then the Airbnb would be separate. I just
Yes,
want to make sure I understand.
yes, I can, if you're interested, I can give you the exact citation, but the use permission states short-term rental as an accessory use to a principal residential use.
I'm unfortunately very familiar with it because we have a lot of we have a number of short-term rentals, and it's, I think, trash collection, empty buildings, things like that. I'm very familiar with it. And I know there's a analysis about how many days you have to be in the primary residence. And I think that at last I looked, you have to have the primary residence listed on your tax, and you can't be a corporation or an LLC. That's my understanding of it. So what I'm trying to figure out here, if that's the case, and it's very hard to, we've tried to get some enforcement on that. So and it's difficult. So you're saying in these new lots, it would be the primary residence. They'd have to be listed on the tax record. And then they would have a separate unit for these short-term rentals, all on this 15, down to 15 feet. I'm just trying to figure out how this would work in our neighborhood.
Well, again, the alley width could be around 15 feet in your ANC. I think probably most of them are that or less.
But it has to be at least 15 feet.
Well, actually, there's no width requirement for a short-term rental for the alley. The alley width requirement is for creating a new lot and for establishing a residential use. And short-term rental is not considered a residential use. It's its own use category.
And that definition also has not changed. So all the uses are remaining the same.
Right.
So you could have what's the minimal width for the short-term rental?
Well, to establish a new record lot, you need to have a frontage on the alley of at least 14 feet. But most of these lots are already existing. We don't anticipate a lot of new creation of alley lots.
No, and I understand, again, we just have 180 lots. So I'm trying to envision if one was to create these short-term rentals, right?
So what is your question again? I'm sorry.
If one was to create the short-term rentals, so you don't have a width requirement for the short-term rental, and it would have to be attached to an existing residence.
Someone's
Not a new
principal residence.
Not a new one.
No, it could be a new one. It could be a new residence, but there has to be a principal residential use on the property. And then you're permitted to do the short-term rental.
And that new residential building needs to be at least 15 feet.
No.
See, I'm just, I know I'm being specific, but it matters with 180 lots. Just understand this.
Yes,
So
the 15 feet again is not the width of the lot or the building. The 15 feet is the width of the alley. Okay.
yep. I
So that has
I
not,
have you. Yep. So
that has nothing to
there
do with the
any
width of the
width or
property.
lot occupancy and no other requirements about, so this short-term rental, no width requirements, and then the alley access can be 15 feet.
Yes, well, yes. And in fact, again, the only use that has a width requirement for the alley is residential use. Short-term rental is not a residential use. Theoretically, there could be an existing residential unit on an alley more narrow than 15 feet. And there's also a special exception process to establish your residential use on an alley less than 15 feet. So the alley could be more narrow than 15 feet. But the size of the building is governed by the development standards. So there you're talking about lot occupancy and yards and height limits. So those are the things that govern the volume of the building.
All right, we'll focus on the usage, just based upon what else we're seeing here. And with the understanding you're trying to create residential density, I think that's the goal.
That's one goal, yes.
That's the key goal though, right?
I think, utilizing vacant lots, which have existed for many years without any viable use, I think is something that we hope to achieve. It's a concern that the alley lot owners have expressed to us and expressed to the zoning commission. And I think the zoning commission, like I said at the beginning, was sympathetic to those concerns and wanted to make it easier for alley lot owners to use their properties.
I have one more question. With this access for, parking or trash collection, and you have a narrower, right? You can build so it could be narrower in the back, right? And more challenging. No,
You cannot build on an alley. An alley is public property. It's not a lot that you can build on.
And I understand that, but in some instances we've sold, there's been unique circumstances where people have buttoned a strip behind an alley, right? And it's very narrow. And if it was built on, it would be hard to navigate behind all the homes. So would that be considered? And I can speak with you offline on that, but I have some examples of that. I just want to make sure we're thoughtfully doing this because it's just an access issue for the other neighbors.
Okay. Yeah. If it was built on or sold or something like that, that is not a public alley. It's not used for access for city services. I suppose there are probably instances where private alleys have been constructed and they have a permanent easement on it for trash trucks or something like that. But we're not talking about private alleys. These are only public alleys that where alley lots would be created or where they exist and would be impacted by these zoning regulations.
Great.
All right. Well, any other final questions? Again, thanks for attending this evening. Appreciate your time. On behalf of Shepard and Michael, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Have a good night.
Night.